Thank you for checking out Real Talk Personal Finance. Shit's about to get real. Cash Flow King with you today. And in today's episode, we have 2025 limits and why the super catch-up doesn't really matter. Thanks so much for tuning into the show. As always, we really appreciate it. Excuse me if I'm a little bit gassy right now, rocking a Mountain Dew from our friends at Circle K for a whopping 84 cents a cup for an XL. Any size, really. Why not get the XL? Couple of quick announcements we have for you. So the first one, I would like to give a very warm welcome to our newest premium subscriber, Andre S. Andre S., thank you so much for becoming premium and subscribing to the Real Talk Personal Finance podcast. We really appreciate it. I already emailed you a couple of documents, including the most recent newsletter. I had revised some Cash Flow Kings favorites for some bank bonuses and sent that all to you with the welcome email. So make sure you are, as I mentioned in that message, using your premium feed so that you have access to and can listen to both the regular, but also, more importantly, the premium podcasts that are only available to premium subscribers, which, by the way, we got some feedback from one of our more active premium subscribers. I'm going to read some of it to you here. It says, "Morning, Cash Flow King. I just listened to the 2 new episodes this morning and wanted to write this email." And he's referring to the 2, I believe, new premium podcasts. We did a part 1 and a part 2 with regard to our newsletter. "First things first, the Q3 newsletter episode is the reason why I like this show and subscribe. The banter you and Cube Crusher have is what makes this podcast great. 2 different opinions discussed in a funny, comical way." And then he goes on about, I don't want to spoil it for everybody, but we had quite the debate, Cube and I did, and he goes on about his opinions there. I don't think I've shared this with you yet, Cube, so just in case you're listening, I'll read the first part that says, "My opinion is I think Cube Crusher might be spending too much time in the Las Vegas sun, and I say that with peace and love." So I think +1 for the Cash Flow King crowd on our little debate with the premium newsletter and the premium podcast, and anybody that's interested, feel free to subscribe, and you'll have access to those episodes, which is pretty cool. And then he goes on to say, the new episode about the bank bonuses, appreciate the shout out. I actually got $300 for some reason as a bonus. Then he sent a screenshot. He got a $250 plus a $50, yada, yada, yada. Probably going to open another account or 2 in the next few weeks. Thanks for getting this together. It's such easy money. Blah, blah, blah. Okay. And then let's see. He asked a couple questions about repeating the bank bonuses, which I answered via email. And then he said, "Anyway, great shows the last 2 episodes. Keep up the good work. I'm sure this takes time to put all this together, and it's appreciated. I look forward to future episodes. Thanks. Cashflow Rockefeller Prince." So shout out to you, Cashflow Rockefeller Prince. Thank you for providing the feedback. As always, we really do appreciate it. I did get your other email. I'll read that on an upcoming episode. I love, love, love your show idea, and it's something that I've actually been thinking about myself. We'll save that for another day, but that will be coming out at some point in the future. All right, announcement number 2, for those that might have missed it, we did a holiday cashback episode recently. So with the holidays, continuing to rapidly approach, if you're doing any online shopping and you want some quick and easy ways to earn some cash back, feel free to check out the episode from last week. And then finally, as I've said on the past few episodes now, we are going to be doing a $100 giveaway for $25 e-gift cards. I'll probably do Amazon for anybody that's a premium subscriber. So we'll be giving away at least 4 of those. So you still have time to subscribe if you'd like to. Currently, it's only $3 a month, and we appreciate the support. We don't do any ads on this show, and other than my announcements at the beginning, we just give it to you raw. So hopefully you like that, and hopefully you'll consider becoming premium. Okay. Without further ado, let's get into today's episode about the 2025 retirement plan limits. So I'm going to mention a couple other things at the end, but I want to first start off and say that these came out a couple weeks ago. I'm going to go over the big ones. There's probably going to be several that I miss, and that's somewhat intentional because there's just no way I'm going to sit here and rattle off every single limit and adjustment for every single type of plan, but I'm going to go over the ones that I think will affect the vast majority of people. So the first one that most people are going to be concerned with has to do with essentially what we call employee elective deferrals. So that is for plans like probably the most common, which would be 401k plans. You may also have a 403b or 457b plan. Those are a little bit different. But the 401k plan limit in 2024 is currently $23,000 for calendar year 2024, assuming you're under the age of 50. That's the normal limit. Next year in 2025, it is going up a whopping $500, so it will be $23,500. Anybody that is age 50 plus, and then we're going to put a little caret in here, 50 to 59, and then 64 and older. You'll notice we carved out ages 60, 61, 62, 63. We'll get into that a little bit later. But anybody that's 50 plus, 50 to 59 or 64 and older, your age-based catch-up provision will remain the same at $7,500. So $23,000 right now is the normal limit, plus $7,500 if you're 50 plus or going to be 50 plus in calendar year 2024. So that gives you a grand total on the 401k for an employee elective deferral limit of $30,500. Okay, in 2025, that $7,500 portion will remain the same. So the normal limit goes up $500 to $23,500, and the age-based portion, with a couple of exceptions we'll get into in a minute or a couple minutes, remains at $7,500. So you will be able to put in potentially up to $31,000 if you're between age 50 and 59 or 64 and older. Let's see. 457 limits are going to be the same. There's different types of 457s out there. For the non-governmental 457s, you see those a lot in healthcare. It's just going to be your normal limit. So this year in 2024, it's $23,000. Next year in 2025, it's going to be $23,500. And there is not an age-based catch-up on the non-governmental plans, typically found, like I said, in a lot of healthcare systems. If you're looking at governmental 457B plans, that's typically going to be in, as it says, government. That could be police officers, that could be firefighters, that could be government workers. Sometimes you'll see them in school systems. Sometimes you'll see them in higher education, depending on the type of institution. Those do have the catch-up provision, the age-based catch-up provision, which again remains at $7,500. And we'll just put a little asterisk because if you're 60, 61, 62, or 63, we'll come back to that. It's a little bit different for you guys starting next year. There's some other ones here. The other big one I think that a lot of people want to know about are going to be for IRAs and Roth IRAs, so traditional and Roth IRAs. The limit this year, the normal limit is $7,000 in 2024. That will remain the same in 2025, so it will still be $7,000. If you're age 50 plus, you will have the same $1,000 catch-up provision, so you can put in up to $8,000 total if you're 50 plus. That is also not changing next year in 2025. So if you're under 50 years old, 7,000 is the number this year in 2024. It's going to be the same 7,000 in 2025. If you're 50 plus, you can do up to 8,000 this year in 2024. You can also do up to the same 8,000 next year in 2025. There's a few other plans where it changed. Anybody that has a simple IRA, that went up $500 from 16 to 16.5. The catch-up provision on a simple at age 50 plus stayed the same at 3,500. The salary cap to be considered essentially highly compensated, which matters for some plans, not all, jumped from $155,000 to $160,000 for the year. There's another limit. This normally applies to, it can really apply to anybody, but you see this in a lot of healthcare systems with doctors and different physicians that make a boatload of money. One of the 401A limits, the 401A 17 limits, basically they use a certain number, especially when they're factoring in employer contributions. Even if the person makes more than this, they typically base it on a maximum. So this year was $345,000. Next year, that's bumping up a little bit to $350,000. Most people don't need to worry about that. 415 limits, which basically caps employer and employee contributions, is going up $1,000 from $69,000 to $70,000. For defined benefit plans, is going up $5,000 from $275 to $280. And taxable wage base. This one, if you make a lot of money, this will be important to you, especially towards the end of the year typically. If you don't, then you don't have to worry about it. But the taxable wage base, for those that may not remember from previous shows, has to do with payroll taxes and the 6.2% that you as the employee would pay in payroll taxes towards Social Security. Sometimes you'll see that on your pay stub as OASDI for old age survivors and disability insurance. Basically, the cap on which you're paying that 6.2% currently in 2024 is on your first $168,600 in wages. And then in 2025, it's going up a little bit. The new taxable wage base, as we call it, will be $176,100. So you would pay that 6.2 portion on the first $176,100 of wages as the employee. Of course, your employer pays the other portion. If you're self-employed, it works a little bit differently. But those are some of the big ones. So again, the 401k limit going from 23 to 23.5, age-based provision on that, $7,500 is staying the same. On the IRA side, it's staying at $7,000, and the age-based $1,000 is also staying the same. Taxable wage base is going from $168,600 to $176,100. Those are probably the ones that most people care about. And you'll notice I said a couple different times about, if somebody is age 60, 61, 62, or 63, there's this weird little rule that was put in with Secure Act 2.0 back in, I believe, December of 2022, where there were different things that were going to take place at different points in time, and one of them is coming into effect starting in 2025 for plans that choose to adopt this, and the consensus seems to be that most plans will probably adopt this, and Cash Flow King's consensus is it probably doesn't fucking matter, and I'll explain to you why here in a second. But the super catch-up is basically for those in those 4 years, ages 60, 61, 62, and 63 only, will basically be able to put in, instead of the $7,500 catch-up for anyone 50 plus, they'll be able to do a total of $11,250. So basically, during those 4 years, they can do an extra $3,750. Now, on the one hand, that probably sounds like a lot of money, and it kind of sort of is. On the other hand, in my opinion, it doesn't really fucking matter. And let's elaborate on this and why that is, okay? So if we take $3,750 times 4 years, assuming you did that for 4 years, it's basically an extra $15,000 that you can get into a retirement account. Now, that's nothing to sneeze at, and there's a million numbers out there, right? We can go back and say, well, if you had $15,000 at the age of 20-something and you left it alone for 30 to 40 years, here's what it would be under these assumptions, and blah, 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 bullshit. Okay, that might be meaningful back then. But when you are age 60 to 63, chances are, if you're not already retired, you're right on the cusp and rapidly approaching retirement. And that's one of the reasons for this, what they're calling, a lot of places are calling this super catch-up, okay? And I'm not saying it's a bad thing, and I'm not saying that people should or shouldn't take advantage of it. If you're used to maxing out, and let's say you're in your late 50s and you're going to be 60 or so next year, and you want to completely put your, the pedal to the metal and just floor it, there's nothing wrong with that. But I think for most people, generally speaking, they're not putting in anywhere near the maximum anyway. So number one, the reason why it doesn't really matter is because I honestly don't think it's going to affect that many people. Now, for those that are and have been putting in the maximum, including the historical $7,500, or at least the past year or so, $7,500 age-based catch-up contribution, chances are those folks are so far ahead anyway that this extra few $1,000 for a few years doesn't really matter. And the ones that all of a sudden got hit on the side of the head with a fucking frying pan, and somebody said, hey, asshole, wake up. We got these new super catch-up provisions. And you're like, holy fuck, I was only putting in $3,000 to my 401k. And now I can put in a shit ton more than that. I'm going to go ahead and put in the absolute maximum, right? Including this new super catch-up. Okay, well, that's good on the one hand, but on the other hand, I hate to say it's almost too late, because it's never really too late, but you're getting there, right? So the reason I say that it doesn't really matter, again, number one, most people are nowhere near maxing out. And so even if the plan adopts this, and even if somebody falls into those 4 different ages, and they want to do this, most of them aren't going to end up doing it anyway. For those that are already maxing out and putting in a little bit extra, yes, it's going to help them, but they're already set probably anyway, so they're okay. And then the big reason is, if we think about when we talk about retirement income planning, this actually comes up quite a bit in practice. And we get this question a lot. Clients will say, hey, I was contributing X number of dollars into this plan. and I'm going to be retiring in a couple of years. What happens if, and then they come up with this, like, what if I put in this much instead? And maybe it's double, maybe it's triple, maybe it's significantly more than they're currently putting in. And when we look at the financial planning software and we model this out for them, especially when they're super close to retirement, a lot of times clients are surprised to find that it doesn't really fucking matter. And you might think, well, why is that? And the reason is you have different levers you can pull and different variables that are going to come into play. And when you're talking about a situation where they are rapidly approaching retirement and they're only a couple of years out, and then presumably they're going to need to draw down on that pool of assets, if you bump it up and supercharge it for a couple of years only to turn around and start taking some money out right away anyway, it's pretty intuitive to figure out why it doesn't really matter. It's very different than if somebody that's on the younger side, like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, were to put in a significant amount and then let it ride for decades. Yes, that absolutely can make an enormous impact. But the closer somebody is to retirement, the less the contribution rate actually matters. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't contribute and you should take your foot off the gas completely and throw in the towel. That's not at all what I'm saying. But if you're going from a certain level of contribution, even if you're in some cases doubling that, yes, it's going to help more than likely, but it may not help to the extent or magnitude that you imagine that it would. And obviously the reason for that is because retirement is right around the corner. So when we're thinking about levers that we can pull, and the ones that actually typically do matter, and this is kind of a side note, but I think this is important to spend a few minutes on here, is that people can work longer, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they have to work longer full time. Another thing that comes up a fair amount is clients that think that retirement is an all or nothing thing. I'm either working full time or I'm sitting on the couch with my thumb up my ass eating bonbons, right? And neither one of those has to be true. It has to be the case. You can go from working full time to working part time, for example. Maybe you want to start a business. Maybe you want to do some consulting. Maybe you want to go down and work at fucking Walmart. I know somebody that was at Walmart. Well, I don't know them personally, but it was the parent of a neighbor who works at a particular store who's in their 90s. I'm pretty sure she wasn't doing it because she needed the money. I mean, my goodness, right? But she was still working there in her 90s, and she was a greeter, basically. You know, shout out to her. I wouldn't fucking do it. I'll probably be dead before 90. But my point is that some people do it out of necessity. I don't think that was her. Other people do it because they want meaning, they want purpose, they want something to do, they want some sort of structure, and that's a whole separate conversation. But my point here is saying that working longer in any capacity, whether that's part-time or full-time, or even taking, you know, a transition period where your income drops off significantly, whatever the case is, that will typically move the needle more and to a greater extent than increasing your contributions. Why is that? Well, depending on if you're working full-time versus, say, part-time, no matter what, it's going to typically alleviate pressure on different portions of your retirement income scenario. So if you're planning on drawing down from your portfolio, but you're working at least part-time and generating some income, then that income that you're generating is presumably money that you don't have to take out of your portfolio. So presumably it would extend the life of your portfolio itself, right? You know, that's just one example there. But working longer is definitely a lever that can be pulled. Another big one is spending less. And I know you're going to be like, wow, what a great fucking idea, Cashflow King. Where'd you come up with that one, right? And I'm not saying to live in deprivation, but if somebody needs to cut back a little bit, that's going to go a long way towards preserving the length that their portfolio is going to last them, as opposed to putting in a few extra dollars. Because again, they're going to put in a few extra dollars for maybe a couple years and then call it a day and start pulling money out of it. That doesn't work that well, like we said in the beginning. But if they're able to make somewhat permanent cuts and reductions in spending, it doesn't necessarily have to be permanent, but let's say they're more permanent and will last for a longer duration than the last couple years of contributions. Well, again, that's pressure that's not on the portfolio and money that they're not having to draw down from the portfolio, which will typically improve retirement outcomes. So again, spending less is a lever that we can pull. Both working longer and spending less are typically going to be levers that we can pull that will have a higher impact than simply contributing more if we're talking about the final few years approaching retirement. Working longer, spending less, and contributing more. Again, contributing more is typically going to be the least impactful if we're talking about a few years prior to retirement. And that, my friends, is the reason that I say the super catch-up doesn't really fucking matter, okay? Now, doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It just means that for most people, I don't think it's going to have the impact that a lot of people, including those responsible for passing Secure Act 2.0, maybe thought that it would. It sounds good. It's clickbait, makes for good articles, makes for good news stories, gets people excited about how much money they can put away. But if you think about what does that actually mean and how does that translate into retirement income, which, by the way, is a side note, if you ever look at your statement now, on most types of accounts, especially for employer-sponsored plans or any plan that's considered an ERISA plan, so if you have a 401k plan with a match, chances are your plan's an ERISA plan, they will have to put some sort of, I don't want to use the word illustration, but there usually is going to be an excerpt somewhere on your statement that pretty much under certain assumptions will show you, based on your balance and under certain assumptions, this is the type of retirement income you might expect this portfolio to generate. That is a relatively new requirement. It's been out for a while, but a lot of people don't know really to look for it, but that is on there. And I would be interested to see, okay, if you had person A that had a certain balance and then you have person B that has the same balance and they're using the super catch up, and you fast forward 5 years and you look at the differences in those numbers, chances are they're going to be negligible. Again, not trying to say 15 grand is not a lot of money over the 4-year period. I just don't think it's going to move the needle enough to really matter, and I don't think it's as big of a deal as people are making it out to be. I'm sure I'll catch some flack for that. Somebody might give us a fucking bullshit 3-star review again, like I don't know who that lady was. She's probably not even listening to the show anymore. But if you are, shout out to you, I guess, about the show. I'm sure I'll catch some slack somewhere for that, and that's fine. But my personal and professional opinion, I don't really think the super catch-up is going to matter. And with that said, most plans will probably adopt this, but if you are age 60, 61, 62, or 63, and your plan doesn't adopt this, in my opinion, it is not the end of the world. So just something to keep in mind. Okay, couple other things I wanted to mention on some numbers that might be of interest. The standard deduction, which most people are taking the standard deduction, it's going up to $15,000 for single taxpayers in 2025. And for married filing jointly, it's going up to $30,000, a nice round number in 2025. So there's that. Also, if anybody's looking to gift the show some money, the annual exclusion for tax-free gifts, or really gifts you don't have to file a gift tax return for, either way, I guess both of those are technically true, is going from $18,000 in 2024 up to $19,000 for calendar year 2025. So not tax advice, but if you're looking to give gifts and you give a gift to somebody that is under that amount, then you generally do not need to file a gift tax return. And if you give a gift that's over that amount, probably also not a big deal. You technically just have to file a gift tax return, and it comes off of your lifetime exemption amount. Talk to your tax advisor. This isn't tax advice. We don't give any advice on the show, as we always say. There is no tax, legal, financial, or any other advice being given. We just do this for entertainment, for education, to have a good time, give you guys some content, and have a little bit of fun. So that's kind of what we're looking at for today's episode. So once again, shout out to our newest premium subscriber, Andre S. Don't forget to check out last week's episode on holiday cash back and ways to earn more cash back on your holiday shopping and staying safe out there. We are doing the giveaway like I mentioned, and hopefully you got a quick tidbit or two on the 2025 limits, a little bit of info, probably more than you wanted, on the super catch-up. And so that's all we have for you for this week's episode. We appreciate you, and we will see you in the next episode.
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.